Hey guys, my name is Shubham Kejriwal. I am a second year PhD student at the National University of Singapore. I'm pursuing gravitational wave physics, and today I just wanted to talk about some frequently asked questions about applying for PhD applications, not just here in Singapore but across the world, and my experience, my key takeaways from my applications in case someone is planning to apply and does not know where to start. I asked ChatGPT about some frequently asked questions which I can answer, and I'm just gonna try and go through some of these questions which appear to be quite relevant and see if it helps anyone out there. I'm gonna leave checkpoints across the video for you to actually jump to the part that is actually most relevant to you. Again, just a statutory warning, although this should be pretty obvious. This is my anecdotal experience and something that I have personally gone through, so I can only speak to the best of my personal knowledge. Do your own extensive research before applying to PhD applications, because they can be a lot of work, and thus it's important that you are fully committed to it and know what you are doing. Another thing is that I'm going to try and keep this video organic in the sense that I don't have a script prepared except for this list of questions that I just recently asked ChatGPT to generate. So this video can feel a little bit inefficient in a sense that I'm not answering the questions very to the point, but I'm just gonna throw out all my thoughts in answering a particular question, and you can make whatever you want of it. So with that said, let's begin with the first question. What are the basic requirements of applying to a PhD program in astrophysics? So I asked specifically ChatGPT to produce a list of FAQs for a PhD application in astrophysics, but hopefully the questions that I am answering are relevant to other people as well. So for a PhD program in astrophysics, in my personal experience, most of the places asked at least for the GRE scores. What is the full form of GRE? Graduate Record Examination. As far as my experience goes, talking to other applicants in the recent past, this requirement is slowly being rolled out of the requirements. Other than that, almost always you're required to submit a statement of purpose, which basically contains information about who you are, what your research background is, what sort of contributions you have made in academia so far, etc., in your undergrad, your masters, etc. So personally, I came to a PhD program right after my undergrad, so I didn't really have much to say in my statement of purpose, which is probably why a lot of my PhD applications got rejected as well. In retrospect, I think the statement of purpose is really just supposed to be, something personalized to the position that you're applying to, and at the same time talk about all that you have done as an undergrad, which could be relevant. Think of it as one of the first documents that you would read if you were assessing a PhD application, and what sort of an impression you would want that administrator to have, why would you be relevant to their PhD program, etc. That's what an SOP is supposed to be about. Other than that, it's just the regular requirements which you do not personalize all that much. For example, the transcript in your undergrad and your masters, any relevant research projects that you have done, etc., just like a brief description of them or some list of papers that you have published. Another piece of important document that you must submit is of course your curriculum vitae, your CV, and that again should be tailored to the position you're applying for. For example, if I'm applying to a cosmology related PhD program, I will highlight more often the cosmology projects that I have done in my undergrad, rather than talking about something related to gravitational waves or quantum information or whatever. So question 3 is, how important is my undergraduate GPA for a PhD application? If you're coming somewhere, for example, in Singapore, the National University of Singapore or Nanyang Technical University, etc., or in Asia in general, I think the GPA still plays a major role, simply because of the fact that there are so many applications coming in. This is probably the first thing that they look at. Actually, to be honest, even in the US or Europe, although they say that the GPA does not matter that much when you apply for a graduate position, at the end of the day, when they're actually skimming through applications, trying to filter out and get to a more premium layer of students, these are one of the first sort of filters they put in, like the GPA requirement should be greater than 3.5 out of 5 or something. I won't say that it's completely irrelevant, but you don't have anything to show for yourself which is relevant to research, for example, I think you'll still be at somewhat of a disadvantage. The next question is, what kind of research experience should I have before applying? In case of astrophysics, even that is actually quite broad, but that's good because I don't think it should matter that much whether you are applying for a gravitational wave position or an astronomy, radio astronomy position, for example, as long as you have something to show that is relevant to the particular field. For example, if I am applying for a gravitational waves related PhD position, even if I have experience that is relevant in cosmology, I still developed my understanding for a lot of techniques that are relevant to research in gravitational waves, right? So I learned about parameter estimation, Bayesian statistics, probably machine learning stuff. All of that can be totally translated from applications to cosmology to applications in gravitational waves, and to even something that is even more different. It's recording, right? Yes. Okay, thank God. Specifically in the field of astrophysics, I guess most relevant fields could be something like a stronghold on your mathematical basics. So your calculus 1 and 2, maybe some vector calculus, linear algebra, etc. In physics, at least you should have taken some advanced level courses like general relativity, maybe even high energy physics if you're applying for cosmology. And additionally, I think especially for astrophysics, it's quite relevant if you have some coding skills, because a lot of time I spend doing my research, I code, right, on Python, on C, etc. And I have to read other people's codes, and if I don't know what that language means, I won't be able to understand the logic or modify the code in the way that I want. Beyond that, it's just about your research experience and what exactly you've done in the past. It's also very relevant that ChatGPT is asking me to answer how to approach faculty for research positions. In my opinion, what has really worked for me is just cold emailing a lot of people. I know probably the professors watching this video are cursing me right now, because that's probably very annoying. I also receive a lot of cold emails and Instagram DMs about people wanting to do research with me or under me, although I'm just a PhD student. So although I appreciate it, I find it a bit annoying, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who do. To be honest, the sad reality is all of these official channels that you apply for internships or other research opportunities, these channels are already quite filtered. It sometimes works if you just cold email professors, just send in an email and wait for their replies. Of course, don't be that annoying person who keeps on emailing again and again and again, even though the professor isn't replying. If they don't reply once, it's probably okay to send a reminder after 1 or 2 weeks, but beyond that, I think it's important that you respect their privacy, you respect their decision to not reply back to you, and move on to maybe another person who might be more interested in what you're doing. For me personally, out of like the 100 or 200 cold emails that I probably sent to professors across the world, I only got replies from like 2, 3, 4 professors at max, and out of them I ended up doing projects with just 2 of them. So clearly, cold email is a very inefficient process, but at the end of the day, it worked for me because I'm here working with a professor who I initially cold emailed as an undergrad. The next question is, what do I need to know about the PhD application timeline? So my general recommendation would be that you apply as early as possible during your final year of your undergrad or your master's degree. Graduate applications is very different from undergrad applications. If some of you have applied, for example, to the US system, you have like a very nice standardized application submission portal from where you can apply to a whole bunch of different universities. Graduate applications are very different because all of the universities have their own portals that you need to go to and apply to. So you need to be very organized about your applications. I maintain an Excel sheet through which I was able to track what stage of the application I am at for all of the places that I've applied for. And at the same time, the whole process took a really long time. As I said, you need to tailor your CV, your statement of purpose, etc. to the particular place you're applying to. It's probably good to get in contact with the professor that you're applying under as well. And all of that takes quite a bit of time. Usually, if you're applying in the usual cycle, which starts, let's say, in July or August or September every year, I would say that you start applying in the fall of the previous year. So if I'm applying for August 2025, I would start already by September 2024, which was 1 month ago. Some people even submit their applications by that time. And after submitting your application, you can sort of send out an email to the professor to see if they're interested in the application and sort of flag your application to them. Although again, this is probably not going to be recommended if a professor is seeing this. That's something that helps me at least get to know about their decision firsthand before the official decision is out. So I remember applying to the University of Michigan for a PhD position. I was in contact with the professor. I even gave him an interview, and he seemed very positive about my application. But when the decisions came about, I realized that I was rejected. It was not that big of a shock, and I was able to prepare for my plan B, C, and D because the prof was kind enough to let me know over email before the official decision was out. So things like this happen, of course. Nothing is certain unless you have an offer letter in your hand. So it's better that you stay in contact with the professor. Of course, it's up to them if they want to entertain you or not. Many professors won't want to even do that. For those kind souls that do, I think it's important that you get in touch with them first. And again, if you have some competitive exams that you want to give during your application cycle, for example, GRE or TOEFL, etc. For me, most of my applications that I submitted were around October or November, and the GRE that I gave, I took September of that same year. The TOEFL I gave was April of that same year. I think with GRE, you also have the option to directly send your scores to the university. So that takes a bit of time, and some of the universities actually prefer or require that. So you need to take into account that particular, delay as well. So how can I choose the right PhD program in astrophysics? That's a weird question. If you know that you want to work in astrophysics, you probably also know what sort of thing works most for you. Either you want to be someone who's mostly delving into the theoretical end of it, or the data analysis end of it, which is what I am doing, or in the observation end of it, or like instrumentation development or something. So you'll apply accordingly. Many of the faculties have expertise in only one of these subfields, so it's important for you to choose accordingly. Just hope for the best. What kind of funding is available for PhD students in astrophysics? This is a very interesting question and an important one, and something that I want to caution you about before you start applying. Many a times, for something like a system in the US or India, the funding is coming from your professor's, grant directly, something that they've won over time. And so that means that your research positions might be slightly longer because the professor wants to quote unquote exploit you for a bit longer on the same stipend, because once you graduate from your PhD and actually become a postdoc, for example, you are sort of protected by all the labor laws that are in place in your country of residence. If you are a PhD student, you are still a student, your tendency to be exploited might be slightly higher. Compare that to places like Europe or here in Singapore. The funding is coming directly from the government, not through your advisor but through the university itself. Again, there can be exceptions in both areas. In the US, I've seen people who can complete their PhDs really quickly and do not have any experience of exploitation, and at the same time I've seen people here in Singapore, some of my friends even, who feel really exploited by their advisors. But just this sort of extra layer of power that is given to some people in some places by providing funding to you through your advisor, I think that adds an extra layer of potential exploitation that they can have. In some places like the United Kingdom, you actually have to secure your funding yourself. So the university is not directly responsible to provide you funding, or the faculty even, and you get your funding by applying for a scholarship separately, which is a whole another process and something that you need to keep in mind. Sometimes for securing these scholarships, you have to do extra hours of work. For example, I have to provide graduate assistantship in the form of research assistants or teaching assistants or just volunteering for clubs and societies, so that I can justify my stipend and my tuition fee waiver. At the end of the day, after accounting for your research and all of these extra requirements, would you really have time for at least like a minuscule of your personal life, your social life, and if you're getting paid justly for that? It's up to you to decide, and of course sometimes you won't have that option or that luxury to choose, but at least something to keep in mind so that you know what you're getting into. How long does a PhD in astrophysics take? Again, a very good question. In Singapore, for example, the norm is that you should be done with your PhD in about 4 years. Me personally, I plan to graduate a semester earlier. I'm on track to doing that. I have completed most of my graduate requirements. In the US, for example, it's very common for someone to go up to 6 years for a PhD program, even 7 or 8 years. And I think this again relates to the fact that the faculty is paying, so they're in no rush to let go of you. But again, I won't say it's all exploitation. The US system is also a little bit different. Most of the time in your graduate program, you actually spend the first 1 or 2 years just going through different departments, different groups, taking different courses to sort of decide what exactly is it that you want to do. And only then you choose your advisor and actually pursue a PhD. And for someone like me who didn't need those first 1 or 2 years because I knew exactly what I wanted to do, which is quite rare. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. I had the right people around me to guide me about the whole process and what to do. But of course, if that's something that is more suitable and on pace with you, there's nothing wrong in it. Okay, so I've already been speaking for about half an hour, so I'm gonna just try and answer a few more questions before wrapping up this video. What are the day-to-day responsibilities and expectations of a PhD student in astrophysics? When you think about a PhD program, it might come to your mind that it's mostly about doing research and publishing a lot of papers, but in my experience, it's a lot more than that. I think a PhD tells you how to socialize and network. So whenever I go to a conference or something, my main concern is not about how my talk or my posture is going to go. My main concern is how many people I'm gonna be able to network with or socialize with. A research conference is usually the place where you get to talk to your future employers. For example, when you will apply for postdocs, etc., or if you are applying for like a grant, this is the place where you'll find people who are actually going to assess your application. And so it's important that you establish contacts and talk to enough people who will be interested in looking at your application and giving you a good review. For the day-to-day responsibilities, as I already said, you have these graduate assistantships where you actually help the professor teach a course. How competitive are PhD applications in astrophysics? I would say it depends, of course, but I would say on a random draw, your probability of getting accepted should be about 10%. This does not depend upon how good or bad you are. This usually also depends upon how many positions are available, which are usually quite less, about 10%. What is the typical career path after completing a PhD in astrophysics? Wow, these questions are actually really good. For someone like me who wants to stay in academia, I would probably go through the usual route where I apply for a postdoc, maybe some independent grants. If I get them, I can extend my postdoc, do some good research, get acknowledged in my field, and then hopefully after 5-6 years down the line after my PhD, be recognized enough to apply for a tenure track position somewhere as a faculty. I would love to teach students at some point. I would love to inculcate that role of a proper university professor if I am given that. But of course, for someone who's not that inclined to pursue academia in the long term, even then doing a PhD in astrophysics could be quite beneficial because you develop all these networking skills that I talked about. You develop coding skills that are relevant for big data almost everywhere. In today's date, even machine learning plays a great role in data analysis, not just in astrophysical research, but in big corporates and industry as well. Again, transferable skills, there's a lot of them, and you can make good use of it when you're applying in the future for even industry positions. I've seen people who have switched from a PhD in astrophysics to industry doing financial advisory, etc. So totally up to you. What's the work-life balance like in a PhD program? It's not great. For me personally, the project that I'm mostly focused on right now is LISA, the Laser Interferometer Space Antenna, and the place where it's mostly hosted, the research program around it is hosted, is Europe, and I'm here in Asia about 7 or 8 hours ahead of them, which means that most of their day-end meetings, which are 3 or 4 p.m., is mostly like 10 or 11 p.m. for me. I usually have to prioritize those meetings over my personal social life because I'm an early career scientist, I'm a PhD student, and I want to network with people I would want to be employed under in the future, for example. But that means, of course, that my social life usually struggles. I still try to take days off, so I try very hard not to work over the weekend, but for example, if you see some of my sleep journal videos that I put up every Thursday, you'll realize that I'm not very good at, stopping to work at a particular time, let's say 5 p.m. And I end up working until like 10, 11 p.m. sometimes just because, I'm not able to solve a problem or if I have a meeting late at night, etc. Unless you are extremely disciplined about when you stop working, I don't think having a good work-life balance is a luxury that at least PhD students, early career scientists even, can really have. I wish it was different. I am someone who struggles with it, but that's just something that you have to deal with in your daily life. Do I need to be a coding expert to apply? Coding skills are nice to have because you can start doing actual projects early on in your PhD, but I don't think if I were an advisor and I was scoping out PhD students, I would want them to be absolute prodigies in Python programming or data analysis or something, because a PhD, as much as it is about doing first-hand research, it's also sort of a transition to becoming a full-time researcher. And so a PhD is also a place where you learn a lot of these skills. So it's probably okay if you are not very good at coding, if you know the basics, or even if you are sort of inclined to learning about Python programming or, I don't know, R or C or something. I think it should already be good enough. And this is probably going to be the final question that I'm going to take. What should I do if I don't get into a program this year? That's a very good question. I was at the brink of not having any offers when I applied for my PhD, except for this one at NUS and one master's offer in Paris. And I think it's important to consider that even if you don't get into all these different PhD programs that you're applying for, it's probably okay. PhD is something which is very competitive and is becoming more competitive, surprisingly, over the years, because after a master's, people think that, at least in some fields, that's the natural next step, which I don't completely agree with. Even without a PhD, you can do a lot of great things. For example, you can go into industry and translate a lot of your skills that you acquired over your undergrad and your masters. I've seen a lot of my friends who have done undergrad and masters in physics specifically, doing research, go into finance or, even media communication and stuff like that. But that being said, if you don't get into a PhD program this year, there's absolutely nothing wrong in taking a gap. Applying first time obviously gives you some experience about how the process is. Use that experience to become more disciplined about your applications next year, become more aware about the type of positions that are well suited to you and the type of people who will be more inclined to give you an offer next year, right? You can utilize this 1 year doing all sorts of internships. You can apply again through cold emails to professors for short-term projects, upskill yourself in terms of the data analysis skills, etc. I'm not saying it's easy to accept the fact that you didn't get into any of the PhD programs. I'm going to acknowledge that completely. But at the same time, it's not the end of the world. Even during my PhD application, after my undergrad, I was so certain that I would be getting accepted in most of the programs I apply for. What happened was I barely got into any place that I applied for, and that sort of bubble that I had bursted very quickly. Alright, my throat is completely dry now. I'm gonna go and drink a nice hot tea. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope in some way this was helpful, although I just blabbered for I think about 45 minutes. Make of this video whatever you want. Take it by a grain of salt, I would suggest, because these are my anecdotal experiences, as I said in the beginning of the video, and your experience applying and getting into a PhD program and going through it can be very, very different. With that said, thank you so much for watching. I'll hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.